The Rolex Milgauss is perhaps the most divisive line when it comes to Rolex fangirls, boys, and other watch lovers alike. 2 years ago, you could only find very few people willing to buy or wear a Milgauss. You could easily get them at a discount. People would think you are crazy if you had told them back then that in 24 months time people are willing to spend over 10, 20 or even 30% over retail only to get their hands on that watch. Today we're going to find out where the Milgauss is coming from, where we are at today, and what might have caused all this. So let's get started. But before we head into it, I wanted to thank Chrono24 for sponsoring today's video. Chrono24 is the biggest online marketplace on which you can browse offers from all over the world, private and commercial sellers, and from pretty much every watch brand there is. They also offer perks like creating your own watch collection, or their trusted checkout that lets you safely buy your watches online. I will link the watches from this video in my description box down below so you can browse all the offers on Chrono24 and look for the best prices available. I mean, I don't know about you, but when I first saw the Milgauss, it was the black dial version I have here. I had a lot of questions like, what's the deal with the green crystal? How did a lightning bolt seconds hand end up on Rolex? And what is the name all about? Well, we can simply answer all of this by looking at the unusual history of the Milgauss, so let me take you back real quick. Interestingly enough, the Milgauss was released in 1956, the same year when Rolex also introduced a new aperture on top of their dials to display the day of the week, aka the day display on their day dates. But the two watch lines could not be any more different. The day date soon got nicknamed the President due to its popularity amongst the politicians, whereas the Milgauss stuck to its scientific roots. As Rolex aimed to solve problems, for example, creating a watch for divers, which resulted in the Submariner, they wanted to create a watch for scientists and engineers that found themselves surrounded by more and more electromagnetic fields due to the technical advances in the 1950s. So the Milgauss was born. The name itself is a wordplay that comes from the French word mille for 1,000 and Gauss from the German mathematician and physicist Carl Friedrich Gauss, the eponym for the unit of measurement of magnetic induction. Because Rolex built the Milgauss to be able to withstand up to 1,000 Gauss, making it the watch for mentally advanced, smart people everywhere. The first Milgauss watches that came out looked extremely different to the current models, but there are still a couple of design features that survived. As you can see, they started out with a black twistable bezel on an oyster case with a matte black dial, red color accents, sword or pencil-styled hands, and the distinct lightning bolt seconds hands. From that on, Rolex refined the look, got rid of the bezel, and up until it dropped the line in 1988, changed but then reintroduced details like the stick-out markers, the pencil-styled hands, but also heavily toned down the seconds hand with just a red arrow tip, as you can see here on some very rare late 1960s and early 1970s versions. And yes, you did hear that correctly. Rolex dropped the Milgauss back in 1988, and it did take them over almost 20 years to revive it again. In 2007, they brought it back with 3 different models that looked completely different compared to what they started out with. You had a black dial version, a white dial version, and a black dial version with a green crystal. And that brings us to the current Milgauss, so let's see what the nerdy Rolex has to offer. Right, so let's look at the watches that came out of the Milgauss revival, the post-27 watches. For that, I have the white dial reference number 116-400 that actually already got discontinued in 2016, as well as the reference number 116-400 GV with a black dial and green tinted crystal that was released in 2007 and is still available today. The oyster case itself measures 40mm in diameter with a lug-to-lug of 49mm on both and a height of 40mm including the crystal. It's a rather beefy case with thick lugs, and it's definitely on the chunky side of things, especially when you compare it to the now updated case of the Oyster Perpetual, for example. I mean, it's always up to personal preference, but I would say that the modern day Milgauss watches work best on larger wrists. The entire case is polished with a polished bezel, and attached is a 3-link oyster bracelet with an equally polished middle link, making the current Milgauss models definitely more flashy. The clasp is a folding oyster clasp with a 5mm easy link, so you can adjust it to your preferred size. Inside both of these watches beats the in-house caliber 3131 with a power reserve of 48 hours, which isn't too much, a paramagnetic blue parachrome hairspring that is caged into a magnetic shield to protect the movement, which results in the 1000 Gauss resistance. So far for the similarities, but let's look at the differences. The discontinued white dial model offers a shiny white dial with all the orange color accents one could dream of. The minute track and numbers on the outer ring, as well as the Milgauss lettering and the seconds hand, have the same orange color, whereas the hour markers, framed in black and filled with superluminova, are a bit lighter due to the different material used. What's really cool is that the minute and hour hand is filled with chromolite, so we get a very nice two-tone lume in the dark, which looks absolutely beautiful with the bright white backdrop. The black dial model is anything but bright. The black dial itself is matte. We also get two different colors on the minute track, the orange and white, but the Milgauss lettering and the seconds hands appear to be the same tone of orange. The stick hour markers are laid out the same, but on this one we have the 3, 6 and 9 o'clock position markers highlighted in an orange color, whereas the rest is capped in white. This makes for a very cool look in the dark, as the highlighted markers light up in green, while the rest, including the hour and minute hands, shines in a very crisp light blue. The most obvious and admittedly the most confusing difference is the green tinted sapphire crystal and the missing laser crown that comes with it, or doesn't. According to Rolex, the process of tinting the crystal is such a difficult and arduous one that they didn't even bother to patent it, because they are convinced that no one is going to be able to copy it anyway. So currently available are the black dial version with the tinted glass, but also a blue dial version, the so-called Z blue dial with a tinted glass, but there are plenty of discontinued Milgauss models available on Chrono 24 too, if you fancy a more clear outlook. Now that we know where it's coming from and where we are right now, I think it is time to summarize everything so we can understand why the Milgauss is one of the most divisive Rolex models so far. So what's causing all the commotion? Like I've mentioned, the Milgauss basically got introduced as a tool watch for scientists and engineers, even within the same year as the absolutely iconic Day-Date. But then Rolex dropped it in 1988, only to bring it back to life in 2007. Not only did they start out with a rather unusual design to begin with, they also made pretty big changes along the way too. Usually we are used to Rolex making only the tiniest changes, focusing on really perfecting certain aspects over decades, but it seems like the Milgauss is all over the place, changing up the seconds hand, making it a lightning bolt, adding tinted glass, or using heavy orange accents to spice it up. I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just saying it's a bit confusing. As with many watches from the Rolex Professional line, the Milgauss underwent a heavy polish, making it super shiny, and I'd say long gone are the days where the Milgauss would be put aside because it wouldn't have been fancy enough to wear for certain occasions. But the, let's say, quirky design and color scheme still keeps it from being a comfortable transition from casual tool to dress watch for many. You can often read that the seconds hand is an acquired taste, or that the tinted glass takes time to grow on you, and perhaps here's where we have it. There's also the overarching Rolex sport seal phenomenon that is definitely adding fuel to the Milgauss fire. It's a Rolex watch that really does stick out. Given that Rolex really has figured out how to cater to the watch masses and beyond, the Milgauss is still raising brows. Sometimes it's in disbelief or confusion, or sometimes in awe and astonishment too. Either way, it's a unique watch, and I really like the weird kid vibe it gives off, but that's just my 2 cents. So what about you? What is your take on the Milgauss? Make sure to let me know in the comments down below. As always, thank you so much for watching this video today. If you have enjoyed it, make sure to give it a thumbs up, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!